Just making weird noise. Take recording.
Okay, we're rolling.
Right, this is a home interview in Penn Yan, New York. It is the 29th of November 2006, approximately 11 a.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Edwin, Hoyt, Worden, W-O-R-D-E-N, born 9/13/22, in Penn Yan, New York. Before the hospital was built, the present Penn Yan hospital was being built, my great uncle gave his property for the hospitals to get it started, which is interesting. So I was born in the nurses' quarters in Penn Yan, which is not there anymore. What else did you want?
That was it.
Okay.
What was your educational background prior to entering service?
High school, and I was 1 year at Colgate, and then the war came along and I left. I was on a football scholarship. Andy Kerr, does that mean anything to you? Probably not. But he was a renowned coach and very good. And interesting, the last interview I had with him, he said, remember one thing, you're here to get an education, not to play football. And I was on a football scholarship. That's different today.
Yes, it is. Yes. Do you remember?
Then after that, pilot training, and then after that I came back and went to GM school in Detroit to be an automobile dealer, which I was for 50 years.
Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I was at Colgate University studying for an extensive exam that was coming up the next day, and all of a sudden in the hallways I heard Pearl Harbor, Pearl Harbor, and didn't even know what it meant. No.
Do you remember any reaction at all when you found out what it meant, what it was?
Well, it didn't come really initially. It came later when you begin to realize what was happening. And then Roosevelt had been trying to get us into the war with Germany before this, and was always voted down almost unanimously. Almost. It was like 200 to 1 or something of that sort. And then after Pearl Harbor, it was a different story, different and totally. Everybody was wanted to be part of this. They sent a recruiting team to Colgate in the spring of '42, and I enlisted in Army Air Corps in the spring of '42.
Why did you decide to enlist in the Army Air Corps?
Because I always wanted to be an aeronautical engineer.
Had you ever flown much prior to this?
No.
You just had that
Yeah.
interest, okay. Where did you go for your basic training?
Basic training was where primary training was Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Well, this picture here is at San Antonio, Texas, and that's near Kelly Field.
Okay, why don't you, since you mentioned that, why don't you hold that up in front of you and we can focus on that.
Okay. This is a picture of Flight D, picture of me, and must have been, oh boy, August of July, I think, of 1942.
Okay.
Training, learning how to be an Army person.
Okay. What did you learn at Pine Bluff? How long were you there?
Pine Bluff, I was there 2.5 months, and then to Greenville, Texas for basic training. And interesting, the sign as we entered the Greenville was the blackest land and the whitest people. That wouldn't be there today, I'm sure. And then from there to Houston, Texas, Ellington Field. That was the advanced.
Now, what type of aircraft did you learn in?
PT-19, BT-13, AT-6, AT-9,
So you didn't fly the Stearman at all?
no,
Okay.
no. Oh, let's see, what else? That was it, pretty much it. And then to transition in the B-26 at Barksdale Field, Louisiana. And that was the only field that, at that time, that had a 10,000-foot runway. And we were fortunate to have that because they trained also at MacDill in Florida. And the expression was a day, something a day. In other words, they were crashing planes daily with the B-26. In fact, Truman wanted to discontinue the B-26. And I guess somebody said no. And what it was the first airplane really that landed at 150 miles an hour. And everybody else planes were 100 miles an hour or something like that. 17s and 24s were that. But it was a great airplane to fly in combat. It took tremendous beating. I came back one time and my crew chief counted 276 holes in my airplane and still came back.
Was that mostly flak or machine
Flak,
gun fire?
Flak, yeah.
Now, how long did you train on the B-26?
June, July, August. 3 months.
Were there a lot of training accidents with your unit?
We were fortunate, not many. Very, very seldom you'd have an accident. It was always pilot error. I mean, it was just simply that the guy wasn't equipped to fly this. You know, the transition. You have to remember today, forget today, remember yesterday. And most of the airplanes were, well, the B-17 and 24 with cruise indicated about 150 miles an hour. And we cruised indicated about 2 to 210. So it was a different airplane.
When did you pick up your crew?
We trained, I would say the second month that I was in training at Barksdale. Yeah. We had several guys. There was a young Jewish guy that wanted desperately to be a part of our crew, but every time he went up, he got sick. And he said, "Give me another chance."
How many were in your crew on a B-26?
6. Well, no, that's not true. It depends on what you were doing. I was fortunate to have flown with Colonel Dewhurst, we led the whole formation of several groups, probably 200 or 300 airplanes, and he was the command pilot and I was the pilot. And on those crews we'd have more than 6, but it was nose gunner, who was bombardier, pilot, co-pilot, top turret gunner, waist gunner, tail gunner.
Did you always fly with the same crew?
Yes, yeah, excepting when I flew with Dewhurst, then it was a special crew.
Now, when did you go overseas?
September of 42. September 43.
Did you fly over, or did you?
No, went over on the Queen Mary.
So you went in a single ship then?
Yes, Queen Mary was very fast. We were all by ourselves. 4 days, and it was going full tilt all the time. And interesting, one of the gyros had been knocked out of balance because of some cruiser had run into the Mary and knocked one of the gyros out. And we got into heavy, heavy weather. I mean, 50-foot waves. They're crashing over the bow of the Mary, and the Mary is a big, big boat. And there was, not interesting, I'm deviating.
No, that's fine.
But the first day out, we had 2 meal times. My time was 10 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock at night. In the dining room, which was huge, absolutely huge, it was full right to the brim. The second day out, the weather began to get a little bit bad, and it was about half full. And the third day out, the weather was terrible, absolutely terrible, and I doubt if there would be 100 people in the whole thing. And there were 15,000 of us on that boat.
And everybody's seasick.
Yeah, they had covered the Olympic size swimming pool and put bunks in them 8 high. I was officer of the day at that pool and equipped with a .45 and told to shoot if anybody gets out of hand. You couldn't have it. You couldn't have anybody that was, and it was simply a safety thing. You know, if somebody started getting wild, there would be a lot of deaths. So anyway, but it was terrible, awful smell. Terrible, awful, awful.
Now, where did you go after you arrived? Where did you arrive, in Scotland? Or
Scotland.
Scotland, and then where?
No, Wales. Wales.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you go from there?
From there, went to Ireland and did some more training, and then back to Great Dunmow, which was the 386 bomb group. Great Dunmow was a little town about the size of Hammondsport, Dundee maybe, but it was a very small village, but fun place. Go in at night and play darts with the people that were at the pub. But Great Dunmow, that was Lady Warwick, and you could tell she had messed with us every now and again. You could tell she was a lady. There wasn't any question about it. And not that she was highfalutin. I mean, she talked with you just like we're talking today, but you could tell that she was more than just the ordinary lady. Yeah. Susie and I went back to my field, Great Dunmow, in 1978. I think 78. I wanted to show her the field where and then what I wanted to show her was the castle, or what we called the castle. It was the manor house. And it had burned down, and all it was, I'm jumping all over.
No, that's fine.
The manor house had burned down, and all was left was the garden house. The garden house was huge. I mean, the manor house was huge. It had a wine cellar, it had a place where they put slaves or people who were bad, that had bars on them and all that kind of stuff. But it was very, very interesting, and we went, Susie and I went there. Susie was my wife, she died 4 years ago.
What about the airfield?
The airfield was all back to farm, all back to farm. The only thing that was left was the place where they kept the shells and where we had a skeet range, and it was a cement block building, and it still was there. But that was the only thing. All the huts were gone, the Nissen huts were all gone, everything. And there was a tree house that was just out of this world. I mean, the tree house, up in the tree, and there was just steps up, and we'd go up in it. In it, the tree, it was about the size of this kitchen, or maybe the kitchen dining room, that built into this tree. It was just, I mean, it was a fun place. We lived in the castle for about about a month, maybe 2 months. Got arrested for burning the king's lumber. You aren't supposed to do that, but we were cold and we went out, cut down a tree and built a fire in a fireplace. And somebody came from the constabulary and told us that we shouldn't do that. So we said okay, but then they provided us with coal. But finally they built us some Nissen huts and we moved back in there. But it was a great experience. I mean, it was just, I imagine in its day was just beautiful. The tub was huge. I mean, it was like 10 foot long by 3 feet wide and all built up and just absolutely beautiful. We go down in the basement and build a fire in the thing that made the hot water come up, and then so we could have a bath in the tub, which was kind of a fun thing. Not you could have gone and have a shower, but we thought that was much more fun. In the room that we were in was the fireplace was probably the size of that end of the kitchen. Just you can't imagine that the opulence of this place. In fact, the original Lady Warwick was a paramour of one of the Prince of Wales, and had a private line built, railroad line built to this place. Interesting history. And the Lady Warwick, as I told you, you could tell she was a lady. And she had died when Susie I went back there, and her daughter, who was going on a tour when we got there, and the garden house manager met us and asked what we were doing here. You know, it was all closed off. It said no trespassing. I convinced the driver to take us in. And this lady came up to us afterwards and said, "Why didn't you tell me that you were coming? I would never have gone. I would have stayed and showed you any." And now she said, "Do whatever you want. You're welcome to any place you want to visit here." And just so gracious, so very gracious. Yeah. I'm babbling on. Right?
No, not at all.
So your missions were all flown out of there?
Out of Great Demo.
What was your first mission, and when was your first mission?
Oh dear. January, February of 44. Yeah. And it was the greatest cowboys and Indians that you'd ever want to participate in. Guns banging, crashing, booming, and people shooting at you, and that was true for probably 7 or 8 missions, and then you begin to realize that, well, John didn't get back, did he? And then but it was originally, I mean, the original start was just out of this world. Greatest cowboys and Indians that you'd ever want to participate in. And of course, in my day, cowboys and Indians were played as young kids. I'm sure that nobody does that today, but in my day, that was the good guys and the bad guys, and it changed off often.
Now, did your plane have a name?
Spare parts. And that's what it was, too.
Who picked that name?
The crew did. Yeah. We landed. Are you familiar with the White Cliffs of Dover?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There was a great expanse of grass just over the lip of Dover, and it was kept free of anything. And if you could see the cliffs, and if you made that, you knew you were okay, because you knew that you could land there. Mm-hmm. And I landed there 2 or 3 times with no wheels and bad. And it was all grass, so you could land without creating a lot of fire and so on. But it was they were just so gracious, so very, very gracious. After you came to a stop, these guys would come up to you, oh, the greatest landing I've ever seen, to make you feel good. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, did you decorate your nose at all? The plane's nose at all, or
No.
just put the name on it?
Yeah.
How about your jackets?
No. No. I guess we weren't into that or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, I don't know.
Did you wear a flak jacket on it?
Flak
Each flight?
jackets and flak helmet. That's another interesting story. We came back one time and the landing gear wouldn't go down. The hydraulic system had been hit and it was no good. So I got thinking, I said, you know, if we all get together and urinate in one of those helmets and dump it in the reservoir, maybe the wheels will go down. And it did, and then that was written up in tech orders.
Oh my God. And it actually worked.
It
Huh?
actually worked one time and that's it, and that was enough. Yeah. Oh dear, goodness. I think one of the most frightening times was we got hit heavily and it rocked the whole plane. It took one hole that size on one side and that off the other side. And it was right by where the waist gunner was. And it took his throat mic right off his neck. Are you familiar with the throat mic?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Took it right off his neck. Didn't hurt him. And after you're hit like that, everybody's supposed to check in. And I said, Points, go down and see what's wrong with Horny. He's not checking in. And he went down. He said, well, he's just sitting there. And he didn't fly for a couple of times. It was just such a awful thing. You know, he could have taken his head right off.
How many missions did you fly?
67.
Now, what were the majority of your missions? What were the objectives?
Railroad marshaling yards, bridges. Well, there was one time we left the formation and went down and bombed the bridge, and I've got a picture. Somebody went over there and I was telling them the story, and they took a picture of the completed bridge now, but our marker was the Eiffel Tower.
Mm-hmm.
And a young brand new pilot came up to me after the briefing and said, what are you going to do? You're not coming back. I said, well, I intend to come back, and I intend to go down and bomb that bridge because I had to leave the formation. I'd be all by myself. And he didn't come back. Interesting. Interesting. But I bombed the bridge and got it and went back up with the formation. I was full bore, I'll tell you, probably 300 or 400 miles an hour, which was very fast at that time.
Now, you mentioned before, when we were off camera, what most of your missions were to...
Oh, marshalling yards.
Well, I mean, the V1 and V2 sites and
yes,
the submarine pens.
that we spent days on that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
days. Just, and it was 2,000-pound bombs. They were armor-piercing bombs, and I think they're still using that size bomb today.
Now, you said that the targets mystified you.
Oh yes, yeah. It was just we were bombing a big old field. You know what?
Mhm.
What are we doing bombing a field and getting the devil shot up? They're heavily flat.
Mhm.
And just getting the devil shot out of us, and couldn't understand why we were bombing a field and taking all these casualties and accomplishing nothing, or we thought we were, and then we were told what it was and understood it,
Mhm.
but they should have told us to start
Mhm.
with. But that was military, you know. They
Yes.
didn't want anybody to know what you were doing. In fact,
Well-
D-Day, we're confined to the base for 2 weeks before D-Day.
Would you tell us about your experiences around D-Day?
D-Day? Yeah. Got up that morning, Colonel Kelly got up before us and said, "This is it, guys." And he broke up. He said, "I've been confined to the base." And the reason was that we were expendable. Everybody thought they would be coming in at 5. We knew we had to bomb visually, and the weather was terrible, awful. And we knew if we got down 500 feet, which we anticipated, that we would be slaughtered. But it was the easiest mission, on one of the easiest missions I flew. Because I guess everybody thought, what are these crazy people doing at 500 feet? But it was necessary, and it worked beautifully for Utah Beach, beautifully. Because we could see the guys coming up on the beach, could see them.
What was your impression when you passed over all these ships?
Goodness. Solid. Just, you've never seen so many boats in a great long expanse of English Channel in your life. Just solid boats. Another interesting thing, the big super dreadnoughts or cruisers or super dreadnoughts firing 16-inch shells. Have you ever seen a 16-inch shell go through the air?
No.
I have. And couldn't figure out what are these things going through the air. And finally realized they were a 16-inch shell. Well, the 16-inch shell is 6 feet long and about 16 inches around. You could see it. Interesting.
How close were you? I mean, at 500 feet, you must have been pretty close to them.
They were arcing in further. They didn't aim for the beaches.
Okay.
It was
Now, what were your targets for D-Day?
the beaches.
The beaches themselves?
Yeah, to give the guys a chance to get on the beach without being shot. Yeah, and that's why Utah was so successful. And Omaha was just slaughtering. I mean, just terrible, awful slaughtering.
No, your targets were what we'd call targets of opportunity then, visual, whatever you saw moving around, is that what your targets were? Or were
Definite target.
such
Yeah,
as
the
bridges and beaches?
Oh, you mean on D-Day?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I'm sorry.
our targets were, we were 30 seconds in front of and that was our time lot, 30 seconds in front of the guys coming up on the beach. And if anybody, it doesn't sound like much today with GPS and all this, but we had none of that, no radar, no nothing, just a hack watch, which I still have. And it's amazing, it really is amazing that we could get so close and be so prompt and right on schedule with all of this and with nothing really to help us.
Now, how long were you able to stay over the beach?
Oh, we were in and out.
In and out?
Yeah.
Did you fly more than one?
We were set for another mission, but never came because we weren't needed. And this again was Utah, and our initial pattern of bombs made it possible for the guys to be there. And after the initial bombing, command didn't know where the troops were because of the drops, parachute drops, and all of this. I mean, they were scattered all over the devil. I mean, it just because again the weather, they couldn't get markers to see where they were dropping. And they had gliders,
Yes.
yeah, gliders, and that was a awful thing too. It was probably the best and worst designed invasion of anything. I mean, you can't imagine any worse, and you can't imagine anything better because it was so successful. But it was a very costly. And I'm sure you've heard that Eisenhower had a letter all ready to go to, if it failed, to his resignation, and it was his fault. Yeah, he came to our base, oh boy, 2 or 3 weeks before the invasion, and rode around in a Jeep. You know what a hard stand is? Does that make any sense? No, hard stand is a diverted place where you kept your airplane so that they weren't put all together. They were all scattered all the way around the base. And our hard stand, we were getting ready for a mission. It was to be one of those V1 and V2s, and we knew we'd get the devil shot out of us, and everybody was unhappy with the world. And this Jeep came up to our hard stand, and this guy got out and walked over, and I looked, and I didn't know him. My name is Eisenhower. What's yours?
What was your reaction when
Oh.
he said that?
But he put you so at ease. Just in 5 minutes, the crew was around him, and just ease.
What rank were you at that point?
First lieutenant. Yeah, just a wonderful, wonderful man. Just, and it did it so you didn't recognize what he was doing. He was getting you ready to go. I'm sure you've heard that story before, that of the ease that he did with
Yes,
the troops.
that.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
what other missions did you have that stood out more? That, you know, which ones stood out more
Oh, I
than
think
others?
when Dewhurst asked me to fly with him and fly the lead airplane and take a couple hundred airplanes behind you, you had to be so technically good, I guess.
Now, did you have Norden sights in your planes?
Yes, yeah. And it was kept, the bombardier took it out of the airplane when the mission was done, and put it back in the security place, and put it in when the mission started. Yeah, it was very, very secretive. Today it wouldn't even compare to anything that they have today.
Did you you yourself ever encounter jets?
Oh yes, yeah. The German jets.
What did you think of them when you first?
Had no idea what they were. They were moving so fast, and every time one would come into the formation, they'd take an airplane down. I mean, it was just nobody knew how to shoot them. They didn't know how to lead them properly. But after they started that maybe when I had about 40, 50 missions, and then we'd meet them every now and again. They didn't have many of them. Axis Sally. We welcome you, Yellowtail Marauders. That was our insignia on our tail, Yellowtail. And we have a great program for you today, and it was always the best music. We listened to it. But it's always welcoming us, always some spiel about we're going to kill you all today, and just amazing. They were so far ahead of us in everything. Their tanks were far superior to ours. Their munitions were far superior to ours. Their 88 millimeter gun could fire at another tank, or they could cut a fuse and shoot up in the air. Another story that maybe you might be interested in, Captain Cochran, friend of mine. I was flying number 2, which would be, he was up 1, 2, 3, and number 2 down here. And he got hit, and his right engine started burning. and you could see him start pulling out of the formation, and you knew what he was doing to get us away in case they blew. And it blew up before he got away. And we flew through this blow up, and the airplane, you know, just went like this. Always check parachutes. Anybody see any? No, nobody saw any parachutes. And this was during the battle for Cannes. Huge tank battle, probably 1,000 tanks on both, you know. And I've got the report. Cochran was at the beach hospital and would be at our hospital that afternoon. And I went to see him. And I said, we didn't see any parachutes. What happened? No, none of his crew was. But he gave the order to bail out, but it happened too quickly. He says, I have no idea. All I know is the plane blew and that I was on the ground and a German tank commander got out of his tank and rolled me into an irrigation ditch so I wouldn't be crushed by all the tanks that were moving around. And he said, I have no idea. I don't know how I got on the ground. I don't know anything except the tank or the airplane blew, and that was it. And he's living today. Yeah, amazing, isn't this? Just so many things, so many times that I'm alive and somebody else is dead. Maybe I should be dead and they should be alive.
Was there ever a time that you felt you weren't going to get your plane back in?
Oh
You
yeah,
ever hit something?
sure. Yeah. And as I say, as soon as you could see the cliffs, you knew you were made it. You got it.
Were you ever wounded, or any of your crew ever wounded?
The closest I came to be wounding, and I still have the piece of flak that came up in my seat, and I had a black and blue seat for about 2 weeks. And I mean, it stung. It really, I thought I was hit. But it was, you know, there was all this padding and all this stuff that we put in the seat simply for that. And just amazing, amazing, absolutely amazing. Can you imagine a hole that size, one side, and taking your waist gunner's throat mic off and not hurting him in any part? Can you? No, every one of them, every one man never had a scratch. I was living on, somebody was looking after me, I can tell you that.
Did you ever get to see any USO shows at all while you were?
Yes, yeah. Who was the man, oh boy, I can't remember his name. He was the star on Broadway for The Music Man.
Oh, Robert Preston?
He was our debriefing officer and debriefed me many times, and we got over to the officers club and sit and talk for hours. Interesting man. He was never a pilot. He never was never had wings. He was just a debriefing officer. Great guy, great guy.
Was he a celebrity at that point?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And there were a lot of them. You know, Stewart was in, Gable was in. There were a lot of them. Would you guys like a drink of
No,
something?
thank you.
Something?
When was your last mission?
September. Dewhurst came into my hut and said, Ed, do you want to go back to the States? I said, yeah, sure, yeah. He said, I'm not kidding, do you want to go back to the States? And I said, well, yes. Well, he said, okay, get yourself in gear. I said, well, I can't clear the base. Oh, I've already done that, don't worry about that. And he said, just remember, you're assigned to me. If anybody questions you, he had some important mission, I don't know what it was. Got back to Scotland, took off on a C-54 and flew to Reykjavik, Iceland. And then from Reykjavik to Maine, and then from Maine to Boston. And we parted there. He was going on to Washington and I was going home. And nobody knew I was coming. Nobody. Susie didn't know I was coming, or nothing.
Oh, you were married before you went into
Yes,
service?
yeah, we were married in August 18th, 1943 at Shreveport, Louisiana in the chapel. That was a permanent base.
Now this was September of what year that you returned?
1944. Yeah. Got back to we parted at Boston, and this is the kind of guy this man was, and he was strict, just military, but just thoughtful every minute. He says, Ed, do you have enough money?
Now you were in service until December '46. What did you do?
Test pilot.
Test pilot?
Yeah, and enjoyed, tremendously enjoyed every minute of that. It was, I flew the first reverse prop airplane, and it must have been an XB 31 or 2 or something like that. And I did it down in Biloxi, Mississippi. And the first time I was on the runway just testing, and I pulled up the reverse props and the landing gear collapsed. Dug holes in the in the runway. But they got it figured out, and then took the airplane off and landed again, and it worked. But it was just something hydraulic that happened. But it was just interesting. I flew 27 different kinds of airplanes when I got out of the service. I had a commercial ticket when I got out of the airplane, or out of the Air Force. In fact, I was going to stay in the Air Force, but came back. Susie and I came back and got a brand new 46 Chevrolet Fleetmaster 2-door and drove it back to Kearney, Nebraska. And got back, and Trowbridge came up to me and said, Ed, we're going to send you to Japan. They had been, what he said, we're broadening you. Which meant I was a budget and fiscal officer for 2 or 3 months. I was a company C commander. You know what a company C commander is? Colored. That was before, yeah. And that was interesting too.
In what ways?
Well, the colored, the majority of them were draftees, and they weren't the brightest. And they were almost ostracized. Every week I'd have somebody that was in the pokey, and I'd have to defend them and get a court-martial. And the answer was always, well, I just had to go to Omaha and have a piece. Does that offend you? Okay. Yeah, but it was interesting. There were some good guys, but it was the majority that really, and they were not respected. Terrible, awful, awful. But it was a good experience, and it did broaden me, which is what Trubridge, he wanted me to stay in. But then he wanted me to go to Japan, and it meant that Susie would have to stay here and we'd be separated. And I said, no, I'm not going to Japan, I'm getting out. And at that time it was a point system, and I had points enough to get 3 or 4 guys out, so I came back to Penn Yan and became a Chevrolet Oldsmobile dealer.
Did you ever make use of the GI Bill?
No.
5220 Club?
No.
No? Did you join any veterans organizations at all?
VFW and American Legion.
Were you active in them or just join?
Semi, I guess. Yeah.
Still a member? Or?
Yeah, still member. The people really, no, this is not, some of the people that join those clubs are just rehashing the war. And I guess I don't do that, so. And it's a drinking club, and I haven't had a drink in the last, well, Susie got sick, so she's been 4, so 5. For the last 9 years I haven't had a drink. But before that, we always, when I came home at night, we'd always have a martini and talk a little bit. She was a fun person to be with. She was fun all the time. Wonderful, wonderful time.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
Yes, yeah. My bombardier, we corresponded. I really didn't go to the reunions that they had every 4 or 5 years. The last 2 or 3 I wish I could have gone, but Susie at that time was sick, and that was my primary obligation. Or not obligation, it was my primary thought. So, no, I didn't. And I wish I had.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
Oh, no question, no question. Made me a better person. Yeah, but just, and Trowbridge was right. I needed broadening. There wasn't any question about that. Made me a better person in my later life. Become a budget and fiscal officer. I was always good with numbers, so it wasn't hard. But it was new, and it was trying to learn how to do what, I guess, what an ordinary pencil guy would do and easily, but it took me some time to do it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the interview. Is this what your plane would have looked like with the yellow on the tail? And now,
Yeah.
who signed this?
Just people that were in the organization.
In your,
Yeah,
did you sign it?
no.
You should. So that's what you were referring to, the yellow tails.
Yellow
the
tail
color.
marauders, and Axis Sally always greeted us, yeah. And always said, we have a special welcome for you today.
Thank you again, sir.
And I went back to see what it was, and there was gas streaming out of one of the tubes that goes across the bomb bay. And the only way that I could get to this was to take off my flat vest, my helmet, my parachute, everything. And we were on getting ready to bomb. If we'd been hit by a piece of flak, we'd have gone up like... And I got back and I stopped the gas leak and then went back to my seat. But can you imagine taking your chute off? What I should have done was just jumped out the door and said, I'll see you guys. No, I'm not coming, kid. But it really was, the bombs were getting ready to go. We were gonna bomb. And to avoid the bombs, you had to reach around the bomb like this. The bomb would be here, and reach around to get to this where it was leaking. And I did it, got it done. But I think he was always jealous, which was not my fault. I didn't do anything to.
Okay.